to our September Free Press Book Club meeting where we're going to be discussing An Evening with Birdy O'Day. And obviously, this month we're in collaboration with the Thin Air Festival, and Charlene is here from the festival, and she'll be talking about that a little bit later. Before we continue, I just want to do a land acknowledgement. Free Press and McNally Robinson and Thin Air are all located in Winnipeg, which is Treaty 1 territory, the traditional land of the Cree, Oji-Cree, Ojibwe, Dene, and Dakota people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'm Erin Lebar. I'm your book club admin. I'm back after a year away on mat leave, so let's hope this all goes off without a hitch tonight. We want to obviously thank Nadia Panku for taking over. She did such a great job keeping things on track while I was away, and obviously Ben has been around helping out as well. So I want to thank him as always. I'll start with our introductions. I'll start with Ben, our books editor at the Free Press. And we have Charlene Diehl of Thin Air. We've got Angela Torgerson from McNally Robinson. And of course, we have our author, Greg Kearney. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's actually not to nitpick, but it's actually Kearney.
Kearney,
like Kearney.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay. I didn't even get a last name, so.
Okay.
In the
Yours is there. It's on the screen. Ben Sigurdson. Everyone knows Ben Sigurdson.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting me. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So our meeting tonight will go as it usually does. Angela's going to do an introduction for us, and then Greg will do a reading, and we'll continue through with the Q&A. If you have any questions, you can throw them in the live chat box, and I will keep an eye on those, and I'll try to interject when possible to get those in. And then we'll talk a little bit about Thin Air at the end of the night, and then we'll talk about next month's book quickly after that. So with that, I will throw to Angela to do our introduction tonight.
Hi, everyone, and good evening. As always, first, I'd like to thank the Winnipeg Free Press and especially Ben and Erin for bringing us all together to discuss another fantastic novel. And just to take the opportunity to welcome you back, Erin. We've missed you. Nadia was wonderful, and we're so happy to have you back. Tonight, we are meeting to discuss the novel An Evening with Birdy O'Day, written by Greg Kearney. Greg Kearney is the author of the story collections Mommy, Daddy, Baby, my goodness, and Pretty. Pretty won a Relit Award, and his novel, The Desperates, was a Lambda Literary Award finalist. Greg has also written several plays and now lives in Toronto. And this novel, An Evening with Birdy O'Day, is wickedly witty and funny. It is as fierce as it is devastating. It tells the story of an aging hairstylist, Roland's childhood friendship with his former musical star, Birdy O'Day, and Birdy's relentless quest for fame that brings them together as young boys and ultimately drives them apart. The novel speaks with such tenderness of Roland's search for himself, where he fits in, and with breathtaking humor, it manages the tragedies and the loves that Roland endures along the way. And with that, it is my sincere pleasure and real enthusiasm that I now get to introduce everyone that has joined us this evening to Greg Kearney. Welcome, Greg, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Oh, thank you for having me. Gosh. Well, of course, I'd love to be in there in the flesh, and hopefully that'll happen soon. I'm going to read. Okay, I'm going to read. So, great précis. I can say no more. Well done. I'm just going to read from early in the book, immediately after Birdy and Roland become fast friends. And Birdy invites Roland to his birthday party. I think he's turning 7 or something. Birdy invited me to his birthday party, I said to Margaret that night. Do you think we can afford to buy him a present? She didn't respond right away. Her eyes were casting left and right like she was looking for something. I guess she was figuring the logistics of her Fae son being gay, being friends with a Fae boy, how to encourage the friendship without getting us killed. You can't go to a birthday party without a gift. What are Birdy's interests? No, I've only known him a few months. Oh, wait, he wants to be a singer. He was singing when we were in the washroom at school. He has a really nice singing voice. It's better than nice. I think he could be on the radio. You know, I always wanted to have musical talent. Does he play an instrument? I'm not sure. Well, he must be able to accompany himself. He needs to be self-sufficient. All right, let me work on it. The day before Birdy's party, my mother produced a small stringed instrument from the call closet. What's that? It's your birthday gift for Birdy. It's a baritone ukulele. I got it at the pawn shop on Hargrave. What if he doesn't know how to play it? He'll learn. If he truly has a passion for music, he'll learn how to play it. The man at the shop says it's very easily mastered. I looked at it. It looked used. But it doesn't have the box that it came in, and there's a scratch on it. I instantly regretted saying that. I went all over town on my one and only day off to find a suitable gift for a child I've never met, Roland. I spent money I do not have. We are poor. We can afford to pretend to be middle class. Hopefully, when we are middle class, we can pretend to be upper middle class, if that's something that's important to you. I fought to keep from crying. I wanted to throw myself at her and beg for forgiveness. When Margaret was mad at me, I felt as though I'd committed some grave moral trespass that would stain the rest of my life. I'm sorry, I said softly. It's really nice. I'd like to learn to play the guitar myself. We aren't musical. My parents had no artistic ability. My father was so literal-minded. I remember him looking out from the newspaper once and asking me what fair weather meant. Ooh, it says here their conservative voters in Manitoba tend to be fair weather. What is that? Does that mean they bring the fair weather? Your grandparents are morons, I'm sorry to say. Or they were morons. They could be dead. I really have no idea. My mother walked me to Birdy's house the next day. It was nice out, warm, but not stifling. Margaret wore a thin white cotton skirt that in direct sunlight revealed her dark panties. Sometimes my mother could be inadvertently licentious. It embarrassed me, but if I mentioned it, she just shrugged and said that all her other underwear was in the laundry hamper. Birdy's house was a sprawling bungalow in pink and white. The front lawn was long and the shrubbery misshapen and spiky. Spiky. There was an old washing machine on the front porch. Margaret, who ordinarily never noticed these sorts of things, briefly paused at the bottom of the driveway. Have you met your friend's whole family? She asked, eyeing the washing machine. Just Judy, Birdy's mom. All right. Well, if anything should happen, or if you're feeling like you want to leave, you'll call. Why would anything happen? What's going to happen? Probably nothing. I'm having a pang. Maternal one. I don't have those often. You go on now. Have fun. Actually, no. I'm just going to introduce myself. It would be rude not to. She tried to take my hand, but I wouldn't let her. It was bad enough my mother had to see me to the door. I wanted to seem independent and footloose, like Birdy. Judy answered the door. She grinned and put her hands to the sides of her face like she was imitating a fish's gills. It's Roland, she wheezed, smelling of alcohol. Is this your mother? Hi, I'm Judy. Gosh, you're so young and pretty, eh? My goodness. Hi there, I'm Margaret Keener. Thank you for having Roland over. He's been really looking forward to Birdy's birthday. Judy's grin dissolved. Oh no, Jerry's got you talking his nonsense. We don't call Jerry by his made-up name. Please don't indulge him. His dad gets so upset. Why don't you come in for a drink? It's just me and little Cheryl and Jerry. Have some broad conversation. Have you read Peyton Place? I'm on the last chapter. It's just the side of a Plume movie. I really have to go. I have a previous commitment, but definitely another time. My mother grabbed a tuft of my t-shirt and gave me her sternest, most cautionary look. The one she saved for Jehovah's Witnesses at the door, or Dan when he was pestering her to let him stay over and she wasn't into it. Be good. Remember what I said to you in the driveway. Do you remember? Say that you remember. I remember. I'm fine. Okay, then. Have fun. Birdy's mother put a hand on my back and nudged me inside. It's birthday party time. Jerry, look who it is. The Porter's house was uncomfortably bright with fluorescent panels of light in the ceiling like you find in a doctor's office. Birdy drew close until I could see the dark of his nostrils. God, I'm so glad you're here. Cheryl's so... I like her, but I can't talk about interesting things with her. All she wants to talk about is stuff that she found in the garbage. and my mother's really drunk. I don't know where my dad is. Happy birthday! I handed him the ukulele nestled in the sewing box and made sacrifice so that it wouldn't look like a wrapped ukulele. He gasped, I have no idea what you got me, but I know I'm going to love it. I followed him into the living room, which was brightly lit by more office lighting as well as several floor lamps, some beautiful, others vulgar. There was a jade serpent lamp that I wanted to steal. The snake's exuberant forked tongue had a hole in the middle with the chain to pull the lamp on and off. There was also a tacky lamp in the shape of a delighted fat baker, replete with baker's hat, baker's apron, and a rolling pin held high and somewhat menacingly, like death's scythe. Birdy's friend Cheryl sat under the light of that lamp, her mouth held neat and tight, like a zipper. Judy teetered in, her coffee mug clinking with ice cubes. Oh, this is so nice. Jay, did you introduce Roland to Cheryl? This is my friend Roland. This is my friend Cheryl. Cheryl offered a wide, oddly maternal smile with her comfortably splayed legs and lacy gingham top. She looked like a contented country grandma, except that she was 7. I smiled and sat on the other end of the couch. Gosh, now we have all kinds of word games and lots of records for dancing. This is your special day, sweetheart. You can do whatever you want, and I'll make myself scarce. I know you don't want your silly old mother hanging around. Then she sat down between Cheryl and me. I'm so proud of Jerry. I was 39 when I had him, almost died. The blood and the afterbirth whooshed out of me like a garden hose. I felt myself leaving my body, and I heard the doctor say, uh-oh, she's a goner. Oh, well. But he denied saying that when I asked him about it after I came back to life. Jerry, I'm telling your friends about when you were born and I almost died. Thank you.
That was fantastic. That was just you captured the demeanor of all of the characters so beautifully. In my having as a fan and a reader.
Right. Thank you.
So it's been there was a long sort of gap between your last published piece of work and this, obviously. Talk about the process of writing this book. Is this something that the ideas started germinating many years back? Have Roland and Birdy sort of been hanging around in your writerly conscious for some time?
For several years, I was writing in a circle. I had no idea of what I wanted to say, how, or whom I wanted to depict. I guess my process is really bad to start off with. Like, I didn't realize that it's probably best to have a story as opposed to like an instinct or some sort of glimmer of something. So I wrote and wrote and wrote during the pandemic. I came up with this sort of bloated version that was passable, but bloated. Basically with the kernel of a friendship between someone unremarkable and someone with prodigious talent. But nobody wanted it. My agent liked it, but whatever. She was being diplomatic. So I scrapped it, and then I just decided to make it as simple as possible. And as soon as I said it in Winnipeg, the whole sort of like it all became clear. Like the pretense fell from the whole enterprise, and the vernacular was immediate. Yeah, it just that was the key. So all in all, this one took me 18 months, maybe.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So the moving it and setting it in Winnipeg was sort of like the key that unlocked the door, and from there the whole story just sort of came about. I mean, maybe if you for people who are watching who aren't familiar, talk about maybe a little bit about you lived in Winnipeg for a time, correct?
Yes. I was born and raised in Kenora, so I was pretty much Winnipeg adjacent throughout my childhood and was there constantly, but only lived there, folly, whatever, I moved there during the pandemic, roosted there during the pandemic, and then met almost immediately this incredible coterie of wonderful people and made fast friends. So, yeah, I mean, I'm constantly entertaining the idea of moving back there permanently, but I can't be bothered. So, yeah. Anywho, I'm a fan for sure.
Yeah, that's great. So I mean, I love a good coming of age novel, and this to me, I consider this. I would consider this a coming of age novel in my mind. The bulk of it, I guess, it's sort of a reminiscing on, on how Birdy and Roland sort of evolved in different ways. But were there other writers or other coming of age-ish or adjacent novels that sort of served as touchstones to the book? Were there things you were reading or thinking about while you were sort of pulling this story together?
No, not really.
Okay.
No, there was no immediate sort of source of inspiration. Although Katerina is, I was reading The Break, which I adored. And that was kind of a boot up the head to like drop the elevated diction and just speak from the heart, write what I know, which is a life lesson I've forgotten for some reason. So yes, she was in. I mostly wrote out of fear that I was accidentally referencing other books and movies. I still am afraid that I accidentally rewrote Beaches. So, but I don't think I have, and I haven't seen the whole movie. So I think Barbara Hershey dies on the beach at one point. Not at one point, she dies on the beach.
So there's no Beaches 2, is what you're saying.
No.
Uh,
No.
Angela, do you want to jump in with anything, or Charlene? Sort of pointing where your faces are on the screen. I don't know why.
Well, you wrote so vibrantly, so colorfully of the club scene in Winnipeg. Is that something that you experienced back like in those years? Is that something that stood out to you? Where did that come from?
Well, I mean, the only existing, oh, no, I think there's a new one, but it sucks. The only existing gay bar in Winnipeg is now Club 200, which I was constantly. So I stole liberally from my experiences there. But otherwise, in terms of like, I don't Face It, was it one called Face It? I don't know. Yeah, is the big hotspots historically I knew nothing about. So that's where my friends were invaluable. Yeah.
And the characters in those scenes, the servers, the bartenders, the bouncers, were they drawn from anywhere, or were they just figments that came to you from like overall experiences?
Okay. The roughly maternal bartender shit is definitely a compendium of wonderful like women, witch type, like classic throwback witch types like I knew and loved in Winnipeg. So yeah, there's a lot of friends and acquaintances in her.
There's so much affection when you write about her that's what made me wonder if it was based on someone, because she's such a key figure to Roland's acceptance of himself.
Yes. And she's, well, I guess for me, she's just aspirational. I guess I'm always as kind of a demi-orphan casting about for maternal figures and sometimes writing them if need be. So yeah.
Well, yeah, and I feel like Roland's mother Margaret is such a key figure in like throughout the book for both Birdy and for Roland, and I thought she was just so fantastically portrayed. I mean, despite her early trauma, it becomes a source of stability and unwavering kindness, and they're able to speak remarkably frankly with her about, about what they're going through and their sexuality and everything else, and these teenage escapades in a way that every time I get to a passage where, she's confronting them or they're having this kind of dialogue, I'm like, well, they're not going to tell her what they've been doing, or he's not going to tell her what, and they just sort of come right out and say it, which I thought was just such a fascinating component of her role in the story too.
Yeah, she's my favorite character, I think, probably. Apart from the narrator. And yeah, a lot of people have really connected with her. That sort of instant disclosure, I think, is very much a Winnipeg kind of North Ontario thing. People don't sit on pretense at all. So the fact that they just spilled it is something I completely relate to. Yeah. And she's so brilliant, she would not have been led along or deceived.
Yeah, that's fair. Charlene?
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more about Birdy and Roland. Honestly, the passage that you just read, I realized, I know before we logged on, I said how much I laughed. I laughed a lot reading this book. I laughed a lot, and I laughed a lot in the reading you just did. I think the perfectly chosen details and the sort of slightly sardonic tone of the telling, it's just pitch perfect. At the same time, it's a very, there's a lot of loss and a lot of pain in this book too. It's it's like you're just threading the needle, and it's often I would be laughing and also feeling quite stung, because a lot of it is really, really like agony. Which I just don't think that's that easy to do. But I wondered if you would talk a little bit about these two, because, and the way you just described them is, one is, prodigious and one is ordinary. And I was fascinated by the dynamic between them, and the way that Roland just, wants to be in, the cast off light of Birdy, with all of, Birdy's great dreams of fame. And there's no way Birdy's not going to, get what he wants, which is, stardom. And I kept thinking, Birdy is fascinating. He's so charismatic. He's so compelling, and he's casually cruel because he is so narcissistic and so
Annoying. Yeah.
But I wondered if you talk a little bit about how you developed those two, but also the kernel of my question is, how much sympathy do you have for Birdy, and how much sympathy would you like us to have for Birdy?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of me in him. When I was a child, certainly I aspired to any kind of fame. I thought it was so edifying. And, I watched Entertainment Tonight. I had a subscription to Billboard. And so there's a lot of empathy for him. And when I'm riffing on his obnoxiousness, it's just for the sake of it. Well, he's annoying, but no. In the end, he's I like him. A couple of people have said that they dreaded every time he was about to get back into the book, which I think has more to do with, I think they got the audiobook, and the guy who read it brilliantly, really brilliantly, great actor. He kind of turned Birdy into a bit of a fishwife, just constantly, braying and just a harpy, which I think was a mistake, because I think he is way more nuanced, even when he's talking out his ass. So, yeah, I was never friends with someone who went on to fame, but I've certainly been close to people who are extraordinary, be they incredibly beautiful, incredibly kind, incredibly socially adept. So, although my default mode was jealousy, and jealousy just can't sustain, I don't think, a novel of this kind. So yeah, it was definitely a misstep to ever, like, yeah, as you said, he wanted simply to bask in the proxy light of Birdy.
I felt a
I
lot
forgot.
of I felt a lot of affection for Birdie. So
Oh,
I'm not
good.
suggesting
Yes.
that, he was harsh. I just thought sometimes he was kind of callous in a
Yeah.
kind of unthinking way.
Yeah.
It's at the same time, I also thought in a way, maybe there's a level where he's actually trying to protect Roland because he can't really have a satellite his whole life. And that's not really fair to Roland either, to ask somebody to move into your world like a permanent satellite, which is what Roland
Yes.
would have chosen for himself.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. No, absolutely. I guess yes. At some point, certainly he would not want. At some level, he would not want Roland to forfeit his adulthood to iron shirts. So yeah, that's great. I'm glad that you thought that.
I felt like,
Yeah, I was gonna
sorry.
say also seemed to save him from the same fate that Bertie's brother Terry had, and his wife, where Bertie had to sort of like send them away. He was like he was kind of done with them, and this way there was this long-standing relationship, whether it be just in their respective heads through this massive distance, but then at the same time they can sort of come back together and reconvene at the end. And I was so curious to see what that was going to look like and how they were going to interact and it was so interesting to see the similarities and the differences in the ways that they spoke when they came back together. It was
Nice. Oh, good, good. Yeah, I didn't want to. I was scared of having it being like a thank you and good night, quote unquote, wrap up. But yeah, nobody's really said they've been dissatisfied with. Yeah, it just ends in conversation and concern. So
Mhm.
yeah,
I did have an inkling in the back of my head. I was like, while Birdie's gone to get ready, I thought he's going to go out the back door and he's going to leave, and he's going to like abandon him all over again. And I thought, no, that's not going to happen.
no, they're very adult. It's sort
Yes,
of.
he probably couldn't move fast enough at that point anyway to get away very.
No.
So it would have been a slow chase.
Yeah.
One of the things for me, Greg, that was exemplified even in your reading was your dialogue. I mean, both like between the characters, but also Roland's internal voice and the different sort of nuances. I don't. I've got to think that has something to do with some of that must come from your playwright, your experience as a playwright, but it is these respective voices that I think definitely help lighten what some of the darker themes in there and sort of allow for a little bit more of this playfulness. You enjoy writing, jumping back and forth between voices, writing different tones and what have you?
Oh, I adore it. I adore it. I was never much of a playwright. I don't really like theater, but I certainly I've always been an act like, oh no, these little drawing room scenes, like that, the one that I read. I mean, it's my métier. Like I love, and I love pitting, high culture against low culture, blue collar patois against pretentious patois. Like, oh yeah, it's a great pleasure.
Like yeah, I mean, there's also the example, obviously, of Roland and Bertie and Dr. Stock, where he's talking to these small children about the most ridiculous, themes and subjects or whatever that they can't
Yeah.
possibly know anything about.
Yeah.
I love that. That was fantastic. Um, I had a follow-up question to that as well, but I can't remember what it was. I've got my sheets here, but I'm not finding it. Anyone else care to jump in while I reload here?
Can we talk about the scrapbook?
Oh yeah, that was one of the things I did want to talk about as well. The way that, sorry, go ahead. Do you
No,
want
no,
to?
if you have a question lined up, you
Well,
go for it.
it's sort of. I mean, I found it so fascinating how Roland's scrapbook sort of serve as this way for him to channel or not channel, but manage his emotions about Bertie instead of festering and wallowing for all these years. He managed to sort of compartmentalize them, and how Margaret sort of tells him he doesn't have to let go of Birdy if he simply kind of reimagines himself as a fan, which will give him sort of the best parts of his old friend, right? So he's taking Birdy and putting him in this compartmentalized place where he can sort of manage himself and manage that relationship. To me, it seems like more level-headedly.
Mm-hmm.
That'll work.
Yeah, no, certainly. That was more of a borderline corny plot device for me. Like I just needed a way to have him lock himself in his bedroom and ruminate. So, but once it was in place, for sure. I mean, it was a real balm for him to cut and paste all those little clippings and maintain equilibrium. Also, in the midst of that, I mean, throughout his life, it was a surprising amount of romantic fulfillment. He's had an eventful life, so it's not like he's been pining away, really, except when he's drunk.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I maybe he sort of muses about being afraid of living a boring life, but he does like Roland. I mean, but he sort of tempers expectation, and I think ends up leading like the little bits that we get about his own life, later on about how he meets his partners and opens his hair salon and what have you. I thought that was very charming as well, and I thought it was a really I almost would have if there would have been more on that, I would have ate it up for sure. So
you're not the first person. That's so funny. You're not the first person to say that. And when I was going back and forth with my agent before we submitted it, and her assistant, they were like loving it, it's perfect, but just get rid of as much of Roland's life after Birdy as possible. Which I did. I excised a lot of information about him. But yeah, no, several people have said precisely that. Like his solo narrative was their favorite, and they wish there was more. So, I mean, you can't please everyone, but
well, unless you write a sequel, I guess you do an evening with Roland. Yeah, and I mean, the novel does start right away with this horrible haircut that he gives to this woman, sort of, and I thought that was a great in, and I really didn't know what to expect until suddenly it was like we were launched way back in time to this childhood, and just sort of came to know both him and Birdy sort of simultaneously. It was fantastic. So,
thank
I
you.
would love to know a little bit about the title. How long did you have it? How did you come up with it? And how do you see it like speaking to the story that we receive when we're reading?
Well, I mean, it's so ubiquitous. Like every performer at some point in their career has an evening with, which is then marketed and released on video cassette, or whatever it is. Yeah, I like a nice generic, like Sheila Heti's first book. She wanted something really just so banal that it was evocative, and she chose the middle stories, which I think is still one of my favorite. So yeah, I wanted something banal, show busy, and yet it was a good umbrella for the knowledge prize.
So for me, one of the things that's intriguing about it is that my feeling as a reader is that I'm traveling with Roland. So, I mean, I'm experiencing Birdy, but sort of through Roland's life. And so when I think this novel is an evening with Birdy O'Day, the evening with Birdy O'Day is like this big, right?
Very much, yeah.
So yeah, just talk to me about like how does it, apart from it being like show busy, I totally get that, and it has that kind of flair and drama, and it puts our focus on Birdy, but in a way that's a little bit of it's a bit intriguing. It's
Chimera. Yeah.
a different direction.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the big news, I mean, I think the first chapter is called is of course that Birdy O'Day is coming back to town to perform. And as a Winnipegger, news like that is pretty seismic in a small town. So it certainly, and it's exactly why Roland locks himself away for hours and hours and hours and hours. So as a catalyst, yeah, you're right that it's slightly deceiving, but it is definitely a catalyst for the whole thing.
I actually started thinking about it after a while. Like that once I finished the book, I was sort of thinking about the title as well. And I thought, well, I mean, we get so many scenes where, Roland and Birdy are, comforting each other, are sort of, curled up in bed together and stuff. And so I think maybe I started imposing that meaning on it as well. So that, I liked the showbiz thing definitely jumped out at me as well. Like you could almost see it on the marquee at the Burton Cummings Theater or something like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting that you grafted their intimate nights onto that as well, though.
Yeah, it's probably my own. I think my own. It says something about my own psyche. Maybe I don't know. I did have, and I would one thing before I have a reader question here, but I would absolutely read any of Barbara's books of poetry should they ever become available. In fact, I could every time I got to one of Barbara's books of poetry, people say they lull or they laugh out loud, but I was howling, and I thought to myself, I don't even know if I can bring these up on the Zoom for fear of actually like being able to start being laughing uncontrollably, essentially.
Well, I'm so glad. That was super fun. And we threw out a lot of variations. Some of them just were so psychotically like such a non sequitur. Anyway, yeah, it was great.
And
It was really fun.
Barbara's Library. I recommend that.
yes, or an evening with Barbara. Okay, so one reader did ask about the choice to have or having so many characters suffering from so many physical debilitating illnesses, alcohol related liver disease, fibromyalgia, MS, AIDS, and I guess in the end Birdy is the only one who really isn't as physically impacted by illness, although his propensity for tweaking his own look throughout the years is certainly
All right.
of his own or whatever. I just sort of was wondering, I guess, or sort of that's a paraphrasing of a reader question about sort of just the decision to have these characters, their physical illnesses or debilitating issues throughout.
Well, I mean, that's just autobiography. I mean, it's all just part of my gestalt. Like, um, my partner was sick and eventually died during the writing of it. I've lived with HIV since I was 20. I've lost countless people. My partner, before he had his final illness, had fibromyalgia, which is just, I had no idea it was so profoundly incapacitating. It was a mental illness. Yeah, I mean, yeah. I could not, like, it's what I have to work with. So, yeah, I certainly didn't want to deluge people with.
No, I didn't feel it was a deluge at all. And I appreciate you answering. That's especially considering with all the personal connections to it. Sort of makes me think back again to Dr. Stock saying to Roland, he needs to come to terms with major themes: death, disappointment, injury. Grim, but poignant, I think.
I also thought that this is also seems to me reflective of people who are living in the shadow of trauma, that there's like lots of illness and addictions are directly related to that, whether it is your own trauma or a trauma that that's come down to you from your family. And there's so much poverty and so much trauma in all of these networks of people that I registered how much physical damage and challenge there was for everyone, but it felt in a way like an honest portrait of what the world is like when you have to push against, against poverty, against trauma, against, no permission for your sexuality. I mean, there's just a lot of pain that manifests then in all sorts of physical ways. That seemed like, it seemed necessary in a way. It seemed illustrative of what the lives were like.
Oh, good. Well, yes. I mean, God. The objection that I've experienced and been exposed to, going all the way back to childhood, and yeah. Well, I don't know. Yeah. So I guess it's like stylistically, it's a cross to bear, and sometimes I'm like, oh, why can't I just write something dystopian, or whatever, But yes, I'm sorry to make that about me. No, you're right. Like it is. I'm constantly have throughout my life surveyed so much human wreckage and trauma, and oh, so. But thank you for acknowledging that through line.
And yet so much humor and resilience and wit and determination and ambition and capacity. Like it's the intersection of all those things that is so compelling that, I mean, I think I'm going to be thinking about these characters in 10 years. I'm going to be thinking about this crew, this motley, eccentric crew, and how much affection and admiration I feel for all of them, in spite of how, messy they are and how injured they are, but also just there's something magical and brilliant about them too. It's not just Birdy who is shining, it's all these characters are in their way, just spitting out light. I love that about the book.
Thank you. Gosh, what an overview. It's very satisfying. Thank you.
I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions.
Oh, is it? Oh my God, time flies.
I know,
Okay.
it's gone so fast. I don't know, Ben, if you have any more in your list there.
I have one more reader question here. Asking about Margaret. She has very open and frank parenting skills, which we sort of already discussed. Is her character based on someone you know or someone you wish you had known?
Again, she's very aspirational. And then in early versions, years and years ago, she was not the mother, but a grandmother. And she was just passive aggressive, kind of incapacitated, not self-possessed. So when I was doing this final drafts, I was like, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if she actually, despite it all, had her shit together in a really momentous way. So yes, aspirational. Also, watching my female friends and their brilliant parent, like just peerless, wonderful, not helicopter-y parenting that informed absolutely. I'm such a fan of their parenting.
Yeah, Margaret was definitely mom goals for me as a new parent here. I'm like, that's what I want to be. Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything from did anything come up during the Erin during the
pretty quiet in the chat.
Okay.
Or Angela, do either one of you have a kind of final question to throw out there?
Yeah, I have one last question. I had a ton of questions about Margaret, but I feel like we've covered most of them now. Birdy is a musical artist. When you were picturing him, who did you hear? Who would be his musical sort of twin?
Music itself or his voice?
Either.
I heard him as a really kind of effortless soaring tenor, like the late artist Jeff Buckley.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, soaring, even possibly even countertenor. But again, I think I mentioned it. Peter Allen, kind of like frothy, bouncy. I go to Rio over and over and over again. Yeah, that's essentially what I heard. With I mean like a frisson of early 70s glam rock, but nothing too terribly accomplished that way.
I don't know why, but I had Harry Nilsson in my mind the whole time.
Oh, really?
Good. That's good. I sort of
Yeah.
was in that wheelhouse as well.
Yeah, so yes, you're right. Initially, there was like a singer-songwriter bent to him when he was a little earnest. Sure, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, probably it's one of those things where everyone hears Birdy's songs in their own way in their head as the novel goes along. I absolutely thank you so much for coming and talking to us. I absolutely love this book. Yeah, I will read it. I will come back to it and read it again, I'm sure, many times in the future, and we'll get my kids to read it as well. So because I think it's just fantastic. So
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time and for joining
thank
us.
you.
I'm going to let Charlene take over for a second to talk a little bit about Thin Air. It's on right now. So, Charlene, can you let us know sort of what's coming up this week?
You bet. So we started on Friday, and we're mostly doing in-person programming this year. We have stuff solid from here forward until October 1st, so 1 week from today. And we have a few things online. This is the start of our online, and then we have 3 events tomorrow at noon, which is a way of still featuring writers who are not here in person, and also, I think, trying to find ways to honor our audience that's not necessarily walking the streets of Winnipeg, but that is interested in the things that we do and might live in rural Manitoba or anywhere across the country. So starting tomorrow, we also have afternoon book chats and big ideas over at the Bill and Helen Norrie Library. And then we have 2 main stages this week on Wednesday and Friday at the new Inuit Art Center at the WAG. And on the weekend, we have lots of cool stuff, including 2 events at McNally Robinson. Rosanna Deerchild launches on Saturday night, and Andrea Curry will be sharing her novel as part of Nijote Stories on Sunday. We also have writing workshops on Saturday and Sunday, and we have a forest walk on Saturday. It's cram-packed. There's a lot of really cool stuff and a lot of really interesting writers. And I would say thinairwinnipeg.ca has all the information you need. And we're just happy to be meeting in person again and feeling there's something electric that happens when people gather together and a writer cares for them with stories and sort of the interesting glimpses behind the scenes. So there's also some great programming in French, which I didn't mention, but there's great stuff in both languages because that is how our city rocks.
Sure.
Perfect.
I just wanted to thank everyone for curating and cultivating this festival. I mean, it's so sprawling. I had no idea that it's really an impressive achievement. So thank you.
Thank you. It's absolutely a joy. And this is Festival 22 for me, and it just does not get old.
Wow. Okay, so just a little bit of book club business before we go. Our next month's book is What's Not Mine by Nora Dector. I started this. It's so good. I'm really hoping everyone enjoys it. And we will also be sending out a survey next week. If you guys can let us know sort of how you're feeling about book club, anything you want to change, anything you want to add. We're just looking for some feedback, so you'll get that next week. And that's it. We're done for the night. We're done for the month. Thank you so much to Charlene, Angela, Ben, and Greg. Thank you all for watching, and we will see you next month.
Thank you, Greg. It was just beautiful to hear you talk about your book. I loved it.
1000% agree.
Thank you, Ben. Thanks, Charlene and Erin, Angela.
Have a good night, everybody.
Okay.
Good night. Thank you.
Is this where we freeze our faces?
Yes.
Yes, this is where you freeze your